So good morning everyone. We are the group 5 and we are going to tackle to you guys the report about the social welfare and social work history of the Philippines during the Japanese period. The Second World War, which brought death and immeasurable suffering to the country's population, was to last for 3 years from 1942 to 1944. So this is during the Japanese occupation here in our country. So during Japanese occupation here in our country, social welfare activities during the period consisted mainly of giving medical care and treatment, as well as food and clothing to the wounded soldiers, prisoners, and civilians. So during the Japanese period, Japanese occupation here in our country, the Bureau of Public Welfare was under the Executive Commission and instructed to attend the general welfare of the residents and to give food and comfort to the released prisoners from the concentration camps. But then, in year 1943, when food shortage became acute in Manila, the Bureau had to cease operations. So why was there a food shortage during the Japanese occupation? So there was a food shortage because food was scarce during the occupation. This was because Singapore's food supply was reduced and whatever came in was unequally distributed among the people.
During the Japanese occupation was undertaken primarily by the volunteer organization. Prominent among these, the Philippines National Red Cross, the Young Women's Christian Association, and the National Federation of Women's League. The Philippines Red Cross. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, the Japanese created a Philippines Red Cross that they controlled to care of internees in 1942. Once Manila was liberated by the combined forces of American and Filipino forces in 1945, the local Red Cross officials and the ANRC re-established an independent Red Cross. And the Young Women's Christian Association is a movement working for the empowerment, leadership, and right of women, young women, and girls in more than 100 countries. Work on behalf of Japanese American incarcerated and federal relocation camp during the World War II was progressive in its vision of racial equality and courageous in its proactive and vocal consistency. The YWCA was a unique among social organization because they saying the internment as an ethical, moral, and political challenge to the profession and the national democracy. And the last one is the National Federation of Women's League. National Federation of Women's Clubs from the Philippines was organized by the Women's Club of Manila in 1921. At the height of country struggles from the independence from the United States. Even before the war, Women's Club serves as the inspired women. The Women's Club serves to inspire women to participate in national development, truth, charity, and social work. This expectation continued during the war and after the war. Thousands of children all over the country were accommodated and no charge in National Federation of Women's Club playroom classes to keep mothers free to work in or out of their homes. Despite of difficulties during the Japanese occupation in the Philippines, the several hospitals such as the Philippines General Hospital, the St. Luke Hospital, the Mary Johnson Hospital, and the North General Hospital continue to provide a medical treatment, food, and shelter. In many instances, churches and convento, were used as centers of operation with a member of religious organization doing their share of volunteer work.
After the liberation, relief work continued to play an important role. Workers of the Philippine War Relief Incorporated Philippine War Relief organized in the United States by Relief of Sympathetic Americans, accompanied the liberating army when it landed in Leyte in 1945, and assisted the United States Army in the provision of medical services and material relief to prisoners of war and displaced persons. During the Japanese occupation, Japanese soldiers and civilians from abroad were repatriated to Japan arms industries, where dismantled and political prisoners were released.
On Japanese invasion, there are other relief agencies which were active in the distribution goods to the needy war victims. So here's the other agencies. ERO, Emergency Relief Office. The role of ERO is either active or retired soldiers may request assistance from any military aid society office located within 50 miles of their current location. ECA, Emergency Commission Administration. PCAU, Philippine Civil Affairs Unit. PCAU were brainchild of U.S. The PCAUs consisted of 30 special U.S. Army teams tasked to revitalize combat-damaged area. PRA-TRA, Philippine Relief and Trade Rehabilitation. The PRA-TRA is to study and formulate plans to the rapid rehabilitation and reconstruction of the Philippine and agriculture, industry, trade, and finance. UNRRA, United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. UNRRA was an international relief agency, largely dominated by U.S. but representing 44 nations.